Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we will be discussing how to motivate and engage employees. My name is Patrick Allen, and I'm the Program Manager for Kent State's Center for Corporate and Professional Development's Public Open Enrollment Programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the country. We offer training as public open enrollment programs delivered in Independence, Ohio, and also on-site custom programs delivered at your location. I am joined today by Kent State facilitator Scott Tackett. I will be serving as your host, and Scott will be our presenter for today. Scott is a human resource and management training specialist with over 32 years of experience in both operations and human resource management. He was employed in a human resource capacity for over 20 years with the Denman Tire Corporation, where he last served as Vice President of Human Resources and Administration. For Kent State, Scott facilitates public and contract training programs for organizations in both the private and public sector with a focus on real-world application. In addition, he is an adjunct professor teaching management and business courses at Kent State University's Trumbull campus. He earned his bachelor's degree in human resource management and his master's degree in organizational leadership from Geneva College. Everyone in attendance today has been muted to avoid background noise from any of the nearly 200 registered participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions in writing using the control panel on the right side of your screen. I will present your questions to the presenter as time permits throughout the webinar. There is also a handout available to you under the Handouts tab. Please download and print this for you to make notes during the presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email with a link to the recording after we conclude our time together. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Scott Tackett.
Good afternoon, everyone. Patrick, thank you very much, and welcome to motivating employees. Many managers and leaders oftentimes struggle with the difficulty of motivation in the workplace. I'm reminded by a speech of Dr. King where he once said that all labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. Well, although he wasn't speaking about the workplace in particular, I think it's really appropriate to the challenges and the opportunities that we have in the 21st century as we deal with the complexities of our workforce. So throughout the efforts of what we're working through, I want to commend you for first your interest in creating a motivational work environment for your employees, and also understanding that this hard work and effort will pay off very, very significantly. I'm also reminded of a book that I read with a statement by a gentleman named Terry Bacon. And Mr. Bacon said that management is at once the most challenging of vocations, however, it's the most rewarding. The principal challenge for most of us is not managing technology, systems, operations, finances, or other resources, but really managing the people. So that's the struggle that we have today and the opportunity that I want to talk about. And really it's concerning the fact of how do we create a motivational environment. I often talk to folks about the fact that I'm asked, how do I motivate someone? I really can't tell you how to motivate someone. What I can help you with, and what I learned over my 32 years, is that what can we do to create a motivational environment? Generally, what we have is that as we try to understand why people behave the way they do in the workplace, there are many, many reasons and many factors. So what I'm going to try to do at the beginning here is just walk you through some of those factors that impact the way that our employees behave at work. We'll start with human behavior. Every day, our employees are confronted with issues that were unheard of a decade or two ago. We typically spend more of our waking hours going to, being at, and coming home from work than ever before. That's never going to change. I say tongue-in-cheek sometimes that we spend more of our waking hours with the folks that we at our job site than we do with our own families. We also have struggles with two-income families, aging parents, growing children. And then ultimately, in many organizations, unfortunately, we find intolerable or soured personal relationships that are allowed to continue. In other words, there's low levels of respect and trust between coworkers, between management and our hourly employees, or between different groups inside of our organization. So all of these factors play into how people deal and address the issues at work. Many experienced managers will come to me and they'll speak about the idea of that, I had an employee who was once a star, but doggone it, they've just lost their motivation. Just don't know what happened. Well, I think that there's a lot of factors that are going to impact what has happened from that star performer. We're going to talk about 3 categories of employees in a minute that I'm sure many of you will relate to as we see how people behave in the workplace. The next thing that I want to talk about is personality. Each of us has our own individual personality. That personality is reflective in our knowledge, our attitudes, and the attributes that make up who we are as a unique human being. So remember, every one of our employees, every one of the individuals that we deal with, regardless of title or position, have our own unique personalities. Now, a lot of research exists that attempts to help explain this complexities of human beings, or in other words, the determinants of personality. I'm going to walk you through those recognized determinants of personality, which then will transcend into maybe helping you figure out a little bit better why people behave the way that they do. So first of all, we have the biological factors. Sex, male or female. Age, we're going to talk a little bit about age today, and recognize the challenges that we have with now what is recognized as really 5 generations in our workplace. Our race, our height, our weight, our physique, our intelligence level. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these affect how a person sees the world, or certainly how the world sees that person. So when we bring all of these different biological factors into the workplace and our personality, you can see that no 2 people are going to be alike. And that's really one of the key takeaways in today's session, and what I try to portray through the discussions of creating successful motivation. It's really about knowing each one of your individuals, knowing what's important to them, not necessarily what is important to you. So we'll talk about the idea of these specific traits. And these are true statements. A person who is tall was sometimes considered to have more leadership ability than a short person. Again, a myth, a mindset, but that did exist at some point in time. An overweight person is sometimes considered lazy and unmotivated. Now, I'm sure all of you can think of other examples. Certainly one of the most prevalent that we find today is the age differences. When we talk about a traditionalist who might be 65, 67, 68 years old versus a millennial, an 18, 19, 20-year-old, and all of those kinds of mentalities. The way that we speak, the way that we talk, might be portrayed as being either very intelligent or maybe not so smart. All of those are mindsets that lead us to sometimes very, very significant mistakes in the workplace. So what we look at is that the next determinant of personality really revolves around our early childhood influences. And please don't misinterpret this. Not here to blame mommy and daddy on the way people behave at work, but it is a known fact that our early childhood influences affect the way that people come into work. So the research would indicate to us that the manner in which a child is trained, shown affection, or discipline will have a lifelong influence upon their behaviors. Do they come from a family where autonomy was valued, where they were given independence, where they were encouraged to explore, or where they had the ability to deal with risk? Think about the opposite, where there was a mentality of keep your head low, don't take risks, don't trust anyone. where we instilled with the importance and the willingness to work with others. Now, this is an important component to 21st work century. Many times, what we find is that in most of our organizations, teamwork today is a paramount, critical component to success. But if someone from their early childhood influences was not taught the importance of working together, not talking about the importance of trust and respect and working as a team, they might find it very, very difficult to all of a sudden come into the workplace and be expected to be part of a team and to be successful in that endeavor. So our early childhood influences directly affect us. Another determinant of our personality, of how we behave in the workplace, is what's referred to as situational factors. What's our current education level? What is our current income? What's our employment, both past and present? This is an important one. Many times in my career, we would have new employees, and I would hear, well, at my old employment, that's the way that we used to do it, or my old company, we did it this way. And sometimes that was frustrating, but yet I had to realize, where did they come from? What was their experiences? And certainly one of the most important components to situational factors are our home life, oftentimes referred to as outside influences. Our employees, just like society, encounter many, many issues each and every day. We might have employees in our workforce that have substance abuse problems, marital problems, financial problems. All of the things that affect life affect us at the workplace. Many employees cannot do as well as maybe others in terms of leaving their problems at the door. So these situational factors, and many of the experts will tell us that immediate situation or environment is really the most important determinant of the adult personality. So someone who you notice that the morale level has dropped, someone where you notice that they seem to be preoccupied, less focused, all of those affect the ability to perform in the workplace, and certainly affects their ability and their level of motivation. So these are things that we have to be aware of. These are the things that come into play that can help identify what and where that employee's level of motivation may be. We then throw into each day's experiences, and it really contributes to an individual makeup and how they view things, where they're taking their role and responsibilities, how they value that role and responsibility. And this really comes from us understanding, as leaders, managers in our company, are we doing a good enough job to recognize these situational factors? Let me give you an example. The personality of, for a lack of a better phrase, a blue-collar worker, or someone who might be in an office setting, performing routine kind of manual labor, either on an assembly line or repetitive work in an office, they're going to be affected by work differently than the personality of a, quote, white-collar worker, someone who's a management level person, a supervisor or leader who is required to make decisions, who is challenged maybe mentally, who's given the opportunity to work through thought and judgment. Our view and our perspective is many times going to be very, very significantly different. Now, let's throw in the idea of cultural values. How and what role does the culture play in motivation? We might have an organization, we might have a mission and a vision and core values. Even today, some organizations still do not have mission, vision, and core values. But no matter what, it comes across every single day as, what do we really truly believe in? Some organizations believe wholeheartedly in competition. Some organizations believe significantly in rewarding for accomplishment. Other organizations are very, very critically geared towards making sure that everyone is given an equal opportunity at employment. An organization where we might find a value of, many of you have ever worked with me know I talk a lot about being firm, fair, and consistent. There's many, many core values or corporate values that affect the way people behave. But this isn't just the only factor, or these aren't the only factors. For many, many years, many organizations were very homogenous, and our cultural values were relatively similar. But something's really changed that is affecting that. And I'm probably not catching any of you by surprise with what the biggest factor in the change, the first time that we've ever seen this significant number of generations in the workplace. For the longest time, I've been talking about 4 generations, and now we're faced with 5 generations in the workplace. And this is basically the 5 generations as they are known today. We have the traditionalists. These are the folks that were born prior to 1945, and currently they're making up about 2% of the workforce. Our baby boomers, the group that was born between 1946 and 1964. Right now, statistics indicate that about 25% of our workforce. Generation X, 1965 and 1980, and they're making up about 33% of the workforce. Our millennials, 1981 to 1996, they are currently the largest percentage of our workforce, 35%. And I just read an article that indicated that within the next 3 to 4 years, the projection is that they will be about 43 to 45% of the entire workforce. So it's very, very significant. And then what we refer to as either Generation Z, post-millennials, they're making up right now currently about 5% of our workforce. So it's a pretty interesting dichotomy. We have a lot of different challenges there, a lot of great opportunities. And as you look at motivation, I think it's pretty evident, and it must be a requirement that as we as managers and supervisors and leaders recognize that the way that we manage a traditionalist, the way that we motivate a baby boomer, a Generation X, or a millennial, or the post-millennials is going to be very different. Now, please don't misinterpret that. We need to hold everyone to a standard of expectation, and I'll never, ever regress from that. It is important to hold people to expectations. It's important to give them the tools and resources. But giving them part of the tools and resources is to understand what is important to them, not necessarily what is important or what we think as managers and leaders is important to them. We're going to talk a lot more about that subject in the next several slides down the road here. But basically, each one of these groups, each one of these generations we need to understand as managers and leaders that they really need to be dealt with in a different manner. No one size or one shoe fits all here, and that's an important component for leadership.
Excuse me, Scott. We did have a question come in. With so much in the news recently about millennials, how do you motivate millennials?
Oh, that's a great question. Not the first time I've heard that either. I think that my point here is that regardless of the age category that we're talking about, millennials provide us some opportunities. Do they provide us some challenges? Yes. But I struggle with when people talk to me about the fact that the belief that the millennials are entitled group. I would submit to you that my experience would tell me that there's been traditionalists that feel they were entitled. There was baby boomers that felt that they were entitled. There might be Generation Xers, all of the groups. I think the important consideration is to really individualize motivation and recognize, and it's right on the slide that's in front of us, the concept of WIIFM. Every one of our employees comes into the workplace with a mentality of what's in it for me. We have to recognize that. And that's why this topic is so important. And that's really why I'm so passionate about this subject of motivation in the workplace. So a millennial, as well as a traditionalist, and all the groups in between, all have in their own view and perspective of what's in it for me. Now, from a leadership perspective, one of the things that's important is to recognize is that we cannot simply just say, okay, well, Tackett told me to say, hey, what's in it for me? And we should do everything that we possibly can. that's not what my point here is. I want you to think about another phrase, WIIFO. And so what I talk through in the full program is the importance of what's in it for the organization. And so I never lose sight of those two. And I think that our job and our responsibility is to tie the two together. I've known many, many managers who have strictly looked at WIIFO, what's in it for the organization, and just worried about goals, and we're not concerned with the WIIFM, what's in it for me. So what happened was, or what would happen, is that we alienated our employees. Our success as an organization is wholeheartedly depending upon the success of our people. What I say is that our best measure of success is how successful are our people. That's how I should be measured. And so the point of all that is that if my employees are disengaged, we're not going to be successful. I know, and I think many of you would concur with me, that our employees are our greatest asset. I would also probably state that they're also our biggest source of disappointment and frustration. But that's the job of management. That's the job of leadership. So the point of this discussion is that I also have to understand that I cannot just focus on the employee side. And managers who only think of WIIFM are not going to be successful either. So what we've got to do is we've got to create an organization where we recognize the goals, and we communicate those goals, and we also put ourselves in a position to recognize what are the needs of our people in the workplace. Every employee has personal and professional needs in the workplace. When I talk about personal needs, I'm not talking about crossing boundaries into their personal lives. What I'm talking about is, how do they like to be communicated with? What are their strengths? What are their deficiencies? What are the things that are really important to them, as opposed to what things might be from my perspective. And again, we're going to talk more about that. So I want you to keep in mind that if we look at successful motivation, it takes a understanding of what's in it for my employees, but also I have to reach the goals of the organization, and that's a critical component to this process. What happens when we don't take into consideration our employees? There's a poll by Gallup, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And they really identify three categories of employees: stars, and the stars are employees who come into work every day and they do their job to the best of their ability. They also identify a group of what I typically call the fence sitters. And usually in a lot of organizations, the fence sitters are the largest number of employees. The fence sitters are kind of those folks who, some days they come in and they do really well. Other days they come in and not so well. We're just never sure what we're going to get. Not a lot of consistency there. And then the third category is what's referred to as the actively disengaged. And those actively disengaged employees are the ones who generally work harder at getting out of work than if they would just do their job. And so in recent surveys and information that is provided to us, disengaged workers are costing us billions of dollars. And I don't know what that number is, okay? That's way beyond me. As a manager and a leader, what I was aware of is that what were the things that disengaged workers really did? Well, they miss more days of work. They tend to be less loyal to employers. And they work oftentimes very hard to demotivate the coworkers. And so let's take that group of fence sitters. We're trying to help the fence sitters perform on a consistent basis, day in and day out. From a leadership perspective, the actively disengaged, what are they trying to do? I've often said that it's misery loves company. And so what happens is that the disengaged workers are trying to demotivate those fence sitters. They're probably not going to get to the stars, but they are going to get can get to the fence sitters. So what happens is that our organization goals are not reached, expectations aren't met, and we are surrounded by demotivation and disengagement. I referenced the Gallup survey, and in this survey, what they resolved was that 54% of our workers are not engaged. 17% of our workers are actively disengaged, and about 29% of the workers are engaged. So putting those numbers together, 71% of our employees are not reaching their potential.
Excuse me, Scott, we do have some questions coming in for you. First of all, how do you motivate when the manager is burnt out, and how do you do this without the employee seeing that burnout or negativity?
That's, again, another great question. In motivation, we have to lead from the top down. If a manager is burned out, that is going to come across to our employees. Not going to be able to hide it. It's not going to be able to bury it in the sand. People are going to take their read off of us. So a manager who is burned out, who is disengaged, who has lost their passion for what they do, we can't expect our employees to be passionate. We can't expect our employees to step up and perform at the highest levels. It is leading by example. And my experience has been that employees know very, very quickly when a manager who's not performing. This is a harsh statement, but a manager who has lost their passion needs not to be in a management role.
Okay, we do have another one just came in. What if an employee has a bad attitude but gets his or her work or projects done?
I typically get that question as well, because what I hear is that the individual is a good employee, and that's very frustrating to me. The individual who, quote, gets their work done but has a bad attitude is a disruptive force in our organization, and that disruptive force needs to be addressed. I think the responsibilities become to try to find out why that person's behavior or why their attitude is not acceptable. Now, it's not about walking around and everybody believing that this is a perfect job, this is a perfect company, because they don't exist, and I'm not expecting that. What I am expecting is that when a person has a bad attitude, I go after the behavior. I'm not going to accuse that person of having a bad attitude. What I'm going to specifically do is go to that person and ask that person and try to communicate with them, try to coach them, and find out and explain those behaviors that are unacceptable. Because a bad attitude, in my estimation, and this is a very harsh phrase, a bad attitude is a cancer inside the organization. And if you go back to the three categories of stars, fence sitters, and actively disengaged, when someone with a bad attitude is allowed to perpetuate that attitude and is allowed to behave in that manner, that is disruptive to other employees. And when we, from a management perspective, don't deal with that issue, it's gonna grow and grow and grow and grow. And ultimately, it is going to affect performance. So I think it has to be dealt with. It has to be done through coaching initially, but ultimately I would tell you, if that attitude and behavior does not improve, then we need to take it to the next step, which might involve a disciplinary process if the individual chooses not to correct the inappropriate behavior. So back to the question of the Gallup survey, 71% of our employees are not reaching their potential. I am not submitting to any of you today that these statistics would fit your organization. I think that'd be unreal and unrealistic. But what I would submit to all of you, what if you have one employee, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever that number might be, who are not reaching their potential? Think about the opportunity that we have to improve productivity, to improve performance, to reach the goals of the organization, and to have an organization of stars, and to have an organization of committed, engaged employees. So don't be overwhelmed by that number, because that's not what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is if we have the opportunity to change one individual to more engaged, more motivated, more productive, more efficient, our organization and you as a manager and leader are going to be better for that effort. because these are the things that suffer when we have the disengagement. And I'm sure that all of you on this call and in this program are very, very concerned every single day about these issues: productivity, quality. When I talk about customer service, I also expand that idea of customer service. I'm a firm believer that we cannot take care of our external customer until we make sure that we're taking care of the internal customer. And I really spend a significant amount of time talking about the importance of internal customer service. And when we have disengaged employees, when we have demotivation that's going on in our workplace, we don't take care of each other. When we don't take care of each other, I think there's a very, very significant opportunity for customer service, outside customer service, to suffer. Creativity. The whole key in the 21st century is to be creative, and that's not a buzzword. The industries that you all come from, the businesses that you're in, no matter what you do, are all based on the fact of being able to provide a service, a product, whatever your responsibilities are, that is above and beyond what your competition. And the way to get that is creativity. One of the killers of creativity is a lack of motivation, demotivated workforce, a lack of engagement. Certainly profitability. We are in business to make money. And I think it's an important consideration to ensure that in order to make money, we have to be performing at the highest levels possible. Now, I don't want any of this to sound like a downer. I don't want us to give up and go, oh, geez, we can't get better. We absolutely can get better. And what I use is Mr. Edison's famous line that many of life's failures are people do not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And from a leadership perspective, please don't ever give up on your employees. But you have to set that example, and you have to make sure that they understand what those expectations are, the tools and resources needed for success, and then the accountability shifts on them. So the key learning point here, that as managers and leaders, we've got to take into consideration the different types of individuals, all of those factors, all of those pieces of the puzzle that I started putting together for you at the beginning: the biological factors, the current situational factors, the childhood influences, where they're at today versus where they think they should be, the age differences. See, all of these make up the individual, and those individuals make up our organization. So a key learning point for me, for all of you, is that we've got to be willing to modify our management styles and our behaviors to accommodate, and please don't misinterpret that, to accommodate and be successful in managing individual motivation. So what that means is I never lower my expectations, but the way that I look at my individuals in terms of motivation, the things that I do that will motivate an individual may be significantly different depending on that individual. But I will talk in a little bit about the idea of what I think the three main components are to successful motivation in the workplace. And we'll talk about that in greater detail.
Okay, Scott, we had another question come in. They want to know, they say, many managers will use different styles to lead. Some pound the table and use intimidation. As a co-manager, I find this tactic useless. How can I reach out to the now hurt employee without speaking bad about the co-manager? How can I change the coworker style if that's all they've ever been used to motivate?
Sledgehammer style of management went away a long time ago. And unfortunately, I do not believe that that is an effective style of leadership. And I feel that there are basically 7 styles of leadership. Pounding your fist on the desk and is not one of those that's recognized as long-term success. What that does is that creates fear. That's a very difficult situation to deal with. I think that what my suggestion would be, first and foremost, to sit with your co-manager and without making any accusations, without being accusatory or aggressive with that manager, maybe start talking about what are the ramifications for that potential, what I refer to as sledgehammer style of management. Beating people into the ground is fear. That fear will not be successful long term, and so I think I would equate it to, is there a better way that we might think about? You really need to address that with the co-manager without that manager feeling threatened, but offering opportunities and solutions that would say, this is what's worked for me, this is what I've tried, these are the things that I think we need to do. Because ultimately, you're going to see that person, that employee, that individual who was treated like that is going to regress. And I really look at this, and again, another good question from the perspective that, it's not so much about how to motivate our employees. It may be more about the behaviors that we engage to demotivate. And I'm going to talk about what those behaviors are. So I think you need to deal with the co-manager first. And you have to be very careful, though, about not going to the employee and superseding the authority and responsibility. I'd be working with the co-manager first, and trying to help him or her through my leading by example and talking about what the advantages are. I think once very difficult situation to create where the employee feels that there's a division in between who we are. I've got to lead by example. I've got to do what I know is right, but I hope I can influence and communicate with the co-manager that this isn't working and give him or her specific examples of why I think it's not working. So I hope that answered your question. We can talk a lot about motivation, and motivation is individualized. If you look at this is just one definition, and trust me, folks, there are hundreds, and they're coming out every day. This is one that I like a lot. It's really pretty simple. The set of forces within an individual that account for the level, the direction, and the persistence of effort that is expended at work. I always like to use the analogy that my job as a manager is to help the young lady get up that staircase, get to the top of the staircase, and then help keep her at that top. And that involves day in and day out activity. Motivation is not a manipulation. Motivation isn't twisting and turning and trying to put people and think that they're important. It is making sure that people understand that you recognize who they are. We have to recognize that people have those personal and those professional needs. We've got to meet those needs and expect that they're going to meet the company's needs as well. This is a question that I get into, and we do an exercise in the full day program, and it's an exercise that's taken from a program that's sponsored by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management. I'm not going to get into this whole program, but the basics of it is that it's a survey that's done year after year after year, and they ask managers, what do you believe motivates your employees? Not what you believe motivates you. Tell us what you believe motivates your employees. They also send out the surveys to non-managerial employees, and they ask those non-managerial employees, the only difference in the survey is what motivates you. Very, very interesting exercise. Over the years, and there's research to support this, and data and books, and in those of us who subscribe to this service, what we find is historically managers believe that the number one motivator for their employees is wages, and it's been done over many, many years. So the idea is that a manager says, I typically think that money motivates. And when I compare the latest results between what managers say versus what our employees say, it's entirely different. And what our employees are telling us, the three things that motivate them: number one, a feeling in on things; number two, an appreciation; and number three, an understanding attitude. And if you would look at the latest managerial numbers, they are 8, 9, and 10. We get a list of 10 motivational items, and we're asked to rank those 10, 1 through 10 being 1 being the most important, 10 being the least important. The point of all of this is there's a reality gap. And that's a point that I make in the program. Managers look at money. Now, to employees. Is money important? Yes. It's actually number 5. Money, in my estimation, maintains. It does not motivate. And so what we've got to look at is that if that reality gap exists, we've got to figure out how to narrow that gap. Now, having said that, will you have employees that are motivated by money? Absolutely. Will you have employees that are motivated by promotional opportunities? Absolutely. Will you have people that are motivated by, job security? Of course you will. But year in and year out, what our employees are telling us, they want 3 things: feeling in on things, appreciation, and an understanding attitude. And those managers, and those are soft skills. Those are soft skills. And so we have to learn as managers how to provide our employees with those soft skills. The soft skills are the hard stuff. They really are the hard stuff. But I just want to make sure that the point of this is that it's not so much about, what some other company or what some other employees are looking for. What are your employees looking for? You have to know them better than anyone. So as a manager and as a leader, you've got to create a climate that fosters a feeling of respect and involvement. So why is that so important? If you have a foundation of respect and involvement, I'm not saying you have a foundation of friendliness, buddies, pals, we're going to sit around a campfire, roast marshmallows type of mentality. But if it's respect and involvement, they will respect you. You will respect them. You can be involved. You can understand. There's a great book called The Talent Masters: Why Great Leaders Put People Before Money, or people before numbers, I guess is the right way. It's about the GE system of leadership development. In that first sentence in that book, it says to us, if companies manage their finances as poorly as they manage their people, most would be bankrupt. So don't misinterpret that. Monies and financials and productivity are very, very important. If we can learn and create a climate of respect and involvement, you will know your employees. You will know what's important. There will be no situation where we have a gap between what's important to them and what's important or what you think is important. So how do I know if I've gotten there? How do I know if I'm clicking with my employees? I think there's four very, very observable and measurable ways to determine that your employees accept and embrace motivation in your workplaces. One is responsibility. Number 2 is self-accountability. 3 is loyalty and self-esteem. People feel good. They want to come to work. They want to get up. They want to do a great job. They are proud to wear your logo, to wear your hat, to wear your jacket. They are very, very in tune with understanding that I am responsible. We've created that sense of extreme ownership where I'm accountable for my actions, which results in responsibility. So these things are all measurable and they're all observable. And that's when you know you're making good behaviors and you're creating a good engaged atmosphere. Do we believe that the problem lies in the basics of human beings? In other words, are people basically bad? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Could our poor behavior sometimes be caused by managerial practices or beliefs? Yeah, I do think that. Let's go back to the earlier question where we have the manager who is pounding his or her fist on the desk, believes in sledgehammer management, believes that I lead by intimidation and fear. Those are things that are going to cause us poor managerial practices and beliefs. And I'm going to give you some examples of this very, very shortly. So as we look at real-world motivation, what I would suggest to all of you as managers and leaders, it requires you to be aware of the individual and aware of our organizational needs. As the leader, we've got to recognize and we've got to find ways to pull the very best out of each individual for the benefit of all of us. So what might you take away from today? And so what I hope you could do is maybe look at this screen and think about a couple things that, hey, yeah, I'm going to try that. I always ask participants in every one of my programs to answer 3 questions for themselves, no matter what program I'm doing. What am I doing really well? Keep doing it. What do I need to get better at? Okay, let's figure out what I'm going to work on. And then, hey, what's not working? So maybe there's some practical applications here for you. Involve your employees in decision-making process. Don't let them sit on the sidelines. Keep them informed. Be aware of the morale level of your employees. And again, just by going to them and asking, hey, everything okay? Is there anything you need from me? What's happening? Maintain an open door policy. Now, I don't mean that you drop everything every time they come to you, but what I want you to do is maintain that open door policy. Know that you're accessible. Let them know that you're accessible. And it's okay to say, Patrick, I've got this project I got to complete. I'll get back to you in an hour. I'll get back to you tomorrow morning. As long as you do, I find that people will be fine with that. Make sure that you listen, treat your employees with respect, ask for suggestions. Don't let them stay on the sidelines, and give feedback. That to me is very critical. Giving both positive feedback as well as constructive feedback. Recognize your employees. Make sure that you are outlining job responsibilities all the time. And it goes back to the example that I've already talked about. Are you maintaining the highest standards possible? And ultimately, correct poor performance. This is critical. The folks and the employees in your organization who are doing their job are expecting you to do your job. I talked about the characteristics of discouraging managers or engaging in those behaviors that are demotivational. And you can read these for yourself, but things like having double standards, talking down to people, or giving feedback, but it's only negative. Discouragement through domination or insensitivity. Silence. Have any of you ever had managers where they were upset or frustrated, they decided not to speak with you or decided not to talk to their employees? Silence and intimidation, domination don't work. What I'd like for you to do for me as a result of today is a matter of business practice, catch someone doing something right. Okay. And try to do that every day. There'll be days you can't catch anybody doing anything right. But if you can, be immediate, be sincere, and be specific. In doing that, you're demonstrating that the organization belongs to everyone. Because in every organization, there's a need for encouragement. And that encouragement has to flow in 4 directions. We have to encourage the people above us. We have to encourage the people across. Below us, we've talked about that. And I want you to be encouraged by how you behave and be proud of how you behave as a manager and leader. Listen to your employees, respect their abilities, believe in them, be enthusiastic. Hey, have a good time at work. Have a sense of humor. Okay, don't be derogatory or in any way, shape, or form humiliating. Admit your mistakes. Give your employees credit for their idea, and be as positive as you can. Please don't shoot the messenger, okay? Don't view mistakes as the world coming to an end. Solicit new ideas from your people regularly. Encourage them to trust you by earning it. Treat everybody firmly, fairly, and consistently, and be as positive team leader as you can. A few other hints: confront discouraged, unproductive people in private. Have confidence that with proper training, your employees can do the job, and develop in yourself that ability to see hidden assets and all the resources of your employees. I saw this on LinkedIn, I believe. What great leaders say to highly engaged teams: what do you need from me to make this a success? Sorry, that was my fault. I value your contribution. What can we learn from it that we can use next time? I have complete faith in you. You've done a great job. What do you think? How could we do this better? Do you have the capacity to do this now? And last but not least, probably the 2 most underused words in business today: thank you. So as we move forward, please focus on mutual cooperation rather than competition to build your team power. The 5 key things that I think you can take away from today: be committed to motivating and retaining your employees. Give recognition and respect. Continue your growth and the growth of all of your employees. Don't let anybody not participate. Take those actively disengaged and deal with them appropriately. let people make decisions, and understand the importance of teamwork. Remember, folks, that you're in charge of your own attitude. Whatever others do or circumstances you face, the only person you can control is yourself. Worry more about attitude than your aptitude or lineage. And that comes from the book by Marion Wright Edelman, In the Measure of Success. I love what Mr. Swindoll once said, the longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think, say, or do. He says, I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with us. I think that we are in charge of our attitudes. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes my portion of the program. Thank you very much. I think Patrick's going to open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I think you actually answered the ones that came in. It was more about how do I find out what motivates an employee and money as a motivator. If you could quickly touch on how do I keep a star employee engaged?
Yes, very, very important. I think a lot of times in companies and in my past work history, we spent more time on problem employees than we did on the stars. My suggestion is that you spend as much time on stars, find out, get them involved, give them additional duties, responsibilities. A star will never tell you it's not in my job description. Reward and acknowledge that star. Get them involved in areas outside of the business, if you can, or outside of their responsibilities. Get them involved in special assignments. I would offer them the opportunity towards maybe training role, mentorship role. One of the things that we lose new employees right off the bat is because they don't feel any connection to the company after we've gone through the onboarding and orientation process. Get your stars. And again, your star isn't about title or position. So find those stars, challenge them, offer them additional opportunities to get involved in areas that may be outside their normal duties.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. Well, that does conclude our time together today. I would like to thank you again for joining us. If you would like to learn more about today's topic, we do encourage you to register for one of the upcoming programs that will be delivered on March 21st and also on April 25th, 2019 at the Educational Service Center of Northeast Ohio, which is located in Independence, Ohio. This program is part of the Certificate of Supervision, so take a look at all those programs, and I encourage you to register early because those programs do regularly fill. You can see the registration link on the screen, and we can also tailor any of the programs and deliver them on site. You can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. You can contact us at 330-672-3416 or email us at yourtrainingpartner@kent.edu. We also encourage you to register for our next webinar, which will be Crash the Barriers, Build Your Team with Kent State facilitator Ned Parks. For those attending live, you will be asked to complete a short survey. Please complete the survey so that we can be assured that we are bringing you the most usable and relevant content possible. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. So on behalf of Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development and our facilitator, Scott Tackett, thank you again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.